This video illustrates the use of the touch command. The touch command is used to set the modification and or access time of a file. First, let's review the layout of the file system and the inode. A directory is a special data file that contains basically two columns. It contains the names of files which are considered in that directory and the inode number, which stores the attributes of the file and tell the system where to find at least the first sector of that file on the drive. So when you run an ls-l, you see permissions, you see the user, you see the group, you see the link count, and you see the modified time or the timestamp for the modification of that file. All that information is stored in the inode table except for the file name itself, which is stored in the directory. So if we do an ls-l on the file me.jpg, what we see here is the dash, which tells us that that's an ordinary file. The file type there, that first character, is stored in the file system, in the inode table. Then we see the permissions. We see the permissions for the user, Lee, which is also shown here, are read, write, and no execute. We see the permissions for the group, and we know which group that is because that's stored in the inode table. And then of course the permissions for the other users on the system. We see the size of the file, and this timestamp is the modified timestamp. And all this information is stored in the inode file. Now there are actually three timestamps for a file on a ext3 style file system. Those are the access time, last time the file was read, the change time, the last time the file, or the last time the inode was changed, and the modified time. The modified time is when the file itself was modified. Now, even though this file says me.jpg, if we cat this, we see it's actually a text file that says hello. Okay, and looking at the time, we see it's September 15th at 9:32. And so if I was to echo something and add something into the file me.jpg, and I do the ls-l, we see that the size of the file changed, and we see that the timestamp of the file was changed because the file was modified, and this timestamp is the modification time. Now if we do an ls-l with a -- full time option, we can actually see the full time, year, month, day, hour, minute, second. And then we can actually even see the time zone, and we can see down into the nanoseconds, which this system doesn't really track to nanoseconds, so it's usually just set to all zeros. Okay, but the full time option will show you the full time. Now the time stored on a 32-bit Unix system is a number, which is the number of seconds since January 1st, 1970, the epoch date of the Unix system. And so what they do is when you store a time, such as the modification time, which we're looking at here, you're storing one 32-bit number, which is the number of seconds since January 1st. And then when you run the ls-l command, it converts it into a time that is more readable for a person to read. Now, as I said before, there's an access time and a change time and a modified time. The ls-l is showing us the modification time, when this contents of the file was actually changed. See, if we cat this file, we can see that we added to it, we had hello in there, we added goodbye. So we actually changed this file. If we want to see when the last time the file was used when it was somebody looked at this file, we will see that that's the time when I just catted it right now, which was at 21:34, about a minute later than when I modified the file. Also, we could change permissions of the file. Okay, to anytime you change any of these attributes that we see here, what you're doing, you're not changing the file, you're not changing the contents of the file, but you are changing the inode. And that is kept in the inode also as the change time. And we can view that by putting a C there. So if we run a C, we can see that the last time this file was changed was 21:33:10, which is the same time that we modified the file. Now the reason that is because we changed the size of the file. Remember that the file size was 6, and then when we put in the goodbye, we increased that size to 14. So the attributes were changed, and therefore the mod time, or the mod time was also changed, and so both of these attributes changed, which therefore also set the change time. However, if I just change permissions, I'm going to say 755 on me.jpg, and now if I look at the change time, we see that the change time is again a few minutes later than the modification, than the change time was here, because even though I did not change the file, I did change the permissions, which is why the color changed. But if we go back and we just look at a normal minus L, we see that the mod time is still 21:33. Okay, because we didn't change the file, we changed the permissions. And so that is the change time, anytime you change something in the inode. Now the touch command will allow us to change the timestamp of the modification time or the access time or both. And by default, if you just run touch me.jpg, what it'll do is it'll change the modified time to right now. It also will change the access time. So if we put a U for when the file was last used, we can see that it matches that time. However, if I use the touch command and I do a touch -T, I can change the mod time to some other time. Let's say the year 2000, the month 03, and this make it March 15th at 10 o'clock, 10:15 in the morning. Okay, so what I've did is I've defined a touch command with a -T here, and I'm giving it a year, a month, a day, an hour, and a minute. And if you wanted to, we could actually even give it a second. Let's say 33 seconds. And we're going to touch this file, me.jpg. Now we're going to look at U, the last time the file was accessed. Then we'll look at the mod time. And finally, let's look at the change time. Now, one way to do this would be to actually run all three commands together. So we can actually put those all on the same command line, separated by semicolons. And we will list each of those, and then we can see them all together. So what we have here is the use time, or the access time, and the mod time were set back to the year 2000, March 15th at 10:15 and 33 seconds. However, notice that the change time is newer. Okay, it is 2009, 9:15:38, which is a few seconds after my last time I modified something here. Because by changing the access time and or changing the mod time, you are changing the inode, and therefore the change time will record that something in the inode was changed. Now there's a couple of reasons where you would want to change the timestamp, the modified time of a file back to a previous time. One example of that would possibly be a digital image that you took using a digital camera. One of the interesting things about digital cameras is assuming that the time clock on the camera is set correctly, when you take that picture and it creates a JPEG, the timestamp of that JPEG is when the picture was taken. And that can be very useful information. So let's suppose that we take a picture using a flash and we get the infamous red eye from the flash. So using the modern tools, we can open up the file, go in there and correct the red eye and remove the red eye from the people in the picture. However, by doing that, we have now modified the file, which means that the modified time has changed. But what we can do using the touch command, we can come back and touch this and set the modification time back to the time when the picture was actually taken, which to me is a lot more useful than when the time that it was that I got around to correcting the red eye. Another very useful example of using the touch command is with the find command. What we can do is we can set a time to some known time on a reference file, and then using the find command we can say let's find all the files in the directory /labs which are newer than our reference file. And what it'll do is it will use as its reference the timestamp that we chose for our reference file, in this case the me.jpg. And so anything newer than that, it will go search those and find those. So you can see I got a large list of files here. However, if any of these files had a mod time older than March 15, 2003 at 10:15, I wouldn't see them. So these are a couple of legitimate uses for the touch command.